You're listening to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. Welcome back to The South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans from the West Coast. I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Sunday, November 21st. And I'm here for the next 20 minutes or so to recap number 4 Ohio State's 56-7 bludgeoning of number 7 Michigan State in Columbus yesterday afternoon. Now, look, the last few weeks I've spent these recap pods talking about what I liked and what I didn't like from Ohio State, but I can honestly say there just isn't enough in the latter category to take that approach today. So I'm just going to talk about what really stood out to me yesterday afternoon. So let's get to it. First, it was a vastly improved performance from the Ohio State defense yesterday. Defensive tackle Haskell Garrett set the tone early on Michigan State's first offensive play, knifing into the backfield on a handoff to Sparty's star tailback, Kenneth Walker III. Walker III was dropped for a loss on the play. Now, Garrett also blew up a screen play later in that drive to force a Michigan State punt. And that was pretty much how it went for Sparty all afternoon offensively. The Ohio State defense held a pretty good Michigan State offense that came into this game 24th nationally in total offense at 449 yards per game to only 224 total yards. Michigan State's only score came at garbage time in the fourth quarter against Ohio State reserves. Kenneth Walker III, the nation's leading rusher, was limited to just 25 yards on 6 carries. Michigan State quarterback Peyton Thorne completed only 14 passes on 36 attempts for 158 yards. That's a 39% completion percentage. Sparty's top receiver, Jaden Reed, was really locked down by Buckeye freshman sensation Denzel Burke and Cam Brown. Reed finished the day with only 2 receptions for 28 yards, so just Sparty could not get anything going on offense all day long, and kudos to the Ohio State defense for that. Look, the Buckeye defense could have played poorly again yesterday, and it probably wouldn't have mattered. Ohio State would have won comfortably anyway, just with the way the offense had been playing. But I thought, and I said this last week in our preview pod, it was very important for the defense to get back on track for their playoff prospects. I thought the defense had shown, steady progress every Saturday since the Oregon loss. And last Saturday against Purdue was really the first time it had taken a step or two back. So very important, I thought, for the defense to get back on track. Now, it looks like the PFF grades are still being tabulated, but as of right now, their overall grade for the Ohio State defense yesterday is 73.8, which, believe it or not, is Ohio State's highest grade since Rutgers when they graded out at 82.3. And that was actually their highest grade of the season. But, let's face it, that Rutgers offense wasn't anything close to what Sparty brought into the shoe yesterday. Interestingly, where the Ohio State defense really stood out, according to PFF, was in coverage. The Buckeyes received a grade of 81.3 in coverage. It was their highest grade in that category of the season. Denzel Burke in particular was great. He finished with a grade of 79.2, only allowing 1 completion yesterday. He finished with 2 pass breakups. Cam Brown, Marcus Williamson, Lathan Ransom all finished with coverage grades in about the 70% range. And really, that's what an Ohio State secondary is supposed to look like against a quarterback like Peyton Thorne, who, let's face it, isn't exactly Peyton Manning. But that's what you would expect from an Ohio State secondary in a game like this. Now, the Ohio State pass rush was also vastly improved, grading out at 68.2%. A little below their usual standard, but still a huge jump from last week's 51.9% grade against Purdue. The Buckeyes sacked Peyton Thorne twice and finished the game with 9 tackles for loss. But what really stood out to me, aside from the statistical line and some of these PFF grades, what stood out to me more than anything was the energy and intensity on the field, especially in that second quarter when Ohio State had jumped out to that 35-0 lead with about 10 minutes to play. And Kirk Herbstreit even commented on this during the telecast. It was the energy and the intensity from the Ohio State defense. You could tell they were playing with a purpose, even with a huge lead. I believe Herb Street said something to the effect of, they were playing as if the score were still 0-0. And that really stood out to me. It was a stark contrast to what we saw around that same time in the second quarter last week against Purdue when Ohio State had a giant lead at that stage in the game. You didn't see the same intensity from the Ohio State defense. I thought they also had a little bit better matchup with Michigan State in this game, and I think a better game plan than they did last week. But the energy and the intensity were a stark contrast to what we saw from that unit last week against Purdue. I was very happy to see that. Another thing I really liked from the defense was the combination of Steele Chambers and Tommy Eichenberg at linebacker in this game. Now, Cody Simon, who started alongside Steele Chambers, to start the game, he only played 2 snaps before leaving the game with what I believe is an undisclosed injury. Some folks maybe thought it was he might have had a concussion, but that led to 50 snaps for Tommy Eichenberg. Now, that was his second highest snap count of the season. And Eichenberg was Ohio State's 4th highest graded defender yesterday with a grade of 75.9. I think Paige pointed this out in our preview pod on Thursday. He said, Sparty, this was a game for a player like Tommy Eichenberg, right? And that was certainly the case. And give Eichenberg credit. He delivered yesterday. He finished the game tied with Court Williams as Ohio State's leading tackler with 7. By the way, Williams, who has not played much of the season, also played very well. He was graded very highly by PFF, somewhere in the 80s. I believe he was Ohio State's 2nd highest graded defender in this game. So credit Court Williams. I actually wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more Williams. I like his athleticism, and he seems like a very sure tackler as well. Okay, so let's move over to the more obvious stuff here. Starting with C.J. Stroud. Stroud completed 32 of 35 for 432 yards and 6 touchdown passes. Now, the bulk of those numbers came in the first half, including all 6 of his touchdown passes. Stroud set a school record with 18 straight completions. He is in total command of this offense. Now, I understand he's working with the greatest set of skill talent in the country. There's no doubt about that, but that doesn't mean Stroud isn't playing at an extremely high level himself. There's a really good piece from Bill Landis on The Athletic right now that I recommend you check out if you haven't already. And it talks about the little things that Stroud is doing, especially with his eyes, to hold the safeties in place, which allows Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson to get open. And most importantly, Stroud is delivering the ball on time and in a way that his receivers can do great things after the catch. So I think Stroud deserves much more credit than he's getting from some of the national pundits right now. I think the national view on Stroud is that he's, I don't want to say a system quarterback, but he's definitely benefiting from Ryan Day as a play caller and all of this elite talent around him. But I think he's much more than that. I really do. And it's really pretty amazing that only a few weeks ago you had a pretty large contingent of Ohio State fans that wanted to see Kyle McCord get more opportunities. I think, after the Penn State performance and the Nebraska performance, looking back on that, it just seems absurd because Stroud has just been so good. And hey, you got to give the kid a little bit of room to grow here. You got to give him a little bit of margin for being a first-year starter and only a redshirt freshman. He's been, nothing short of fantastic these last couple of weeks, especially. Now, through 10 games, Stroud is completing now 71.1% of his passes and 36 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions. He's only been sacked 9 times, which speaks to the amazing protections he's getting from probably the best offensive line in the country. However, Stroud has been masterful in the pocket at evading pressure. He's been really, really good about that. And that has also helped keep that sack total to an absolute minimum. Now, if you look at how Stroud's numbers through 10 games compares to Justin Fields in his first season, which was 2019, and we remember what a special season that was for Fields. Remember, he was also a Heisman finalist that year, Fields was. Through 14 games, Fields completed 67.2% of his passes. He threw for 3,273 yards, which, Stroud has already exceeded that total. 41 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions. But Fields was sacked 31 times that season. I completely forgot about that. It was a staggering sack total. But Look, I mean, Stroud's statistical line right now is very comparable to what Fields did in 2019, and in some areas is already significantly better. He's got a higher completion percentage. He's already, through 10 games, has thrown for more yards. He's at 36 touchdowns. With at least 2 more games to go, I think he's going to exceed that 41 touchdown total that Fields had pretty easily. Look, Stroud is a no-brainer Heisman frontrunner along with Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. I mean, I think it's a clear 2-man race now at this stage, and it's really going to come down to how both play against their rivals this coming weekend. Stroud obviously against Michigan, and Young on the road at Auburn, and also in their conference title games. Now, I know Ohio State still has yet to qualify for Indianapolis, but I'm feeling pretty good about that at this stage. Another thing I absolutely loved from yesterday, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Look, that might be the greatest moniker in Ohio State history, and I think it's appropriate for what the trio of Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and Jackson Smith-Njigba are doing, because it is historical greatness. So they should have probably the greatest moniker in Ohio State history applied here. The devastating wide receiver trio for Ohio State combined yesterday for 24 receptions for 371 yards and 5 touchdown catches. And, all 3 went over 100 yards receiving for the second time this season, which, if I'm not mistaken, is only the second time in school history that 3 receivers have all gone over 100 yards in the same game. Look, we all knew it was going to be a horror show for the Sparty secondary. But look, I think Michigan State fans can take a little solace in the fact that Earth, Wind, and Fire have been doing this to pretty much everyone all season long, regardless of the opponent. So, not much the Michigan State secondary could have done. Chris Olave strengthened his case for the Biletnikoff Award. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how Olave is the only Ohio State receiver that is a Biletnikoff semifinalist. But Olave strengthened his case for that award with 140 yards receiving on 7 receptions and 2 touchdown catches. Although I think his acrobatic catch that he made at the 1-yard line in the first, I believe it was the second quarter, to help Stroud set the school record for consecutive completions might have been his personal best of all time. That was an unbelievable catch. It was kind of like a Willie Mays over the shoulder catch, body twisting and contorting, getting both feet in before he landed out of bounds. What a catch that was. And, it also helped his quarterback set a school record for consecutive completions. Really, really cool moment there. Ohio State is poised to have all 3 of those receivers, Olave, Wilson, and Smith-Njigba, finish with over 1,000 yards receiving this season. Now, that'd be the first time that's ever happened in school history. I'm not even sure Ohio State has ever had 2 receivers go over 1,000 yards in the same season. I could be wrong about that. I don't have the record books here in front of me. But I am also assuming, though I'm not 100% sure of it, that the Big Ten has never seen 3 receivers from the same team in the same season go over 1,000 yards. I could be wrong about that, but I would bet pretty good money that if it does happen here with this Ohio State trio, it'll be the first time both in school history and in Big Ten history that's ever happened. We may never see anything like what we're seeing from Earth, Wind, and Fire ever again at Ohio State, so savor it, Buckeye fans. So where will this performance land Ohio State in Tuesday's updated playoff rankings? After watching Bama struggle at home again, this time it was with Arkansas, winning only 42-35 in a game that was very competitive well into the fourth quarter, and watching Oregon getting its doors blown off by Utah 38-7. I don't know how the Buckeyes aren't your clear number 2 right behind Georgia on Tuesday night. To me, it's a no-brainer. But, anything is possible with the playoff committee, and we know they love Alabama. The Tide always seems to get the benefit of the doubt from the playoff committee, so I would not be surprised if Bama hangs on to that number 2 spot. But Ohio State, I don't think you could make a stronger case than they've made over these last 2 weeks with the way they performed against top 20 opponents in Purdue and Michigan State. We know at the very least the Buckeyes will move into the number 3 spot, and then it's a question of where the playoff committee will have Michigan. I think it'll probably be number 5. I think Cincinnati, who I've been very critical of on this podcast, as folks who listen to this pod will know, I think Cincinnati moves up to number 4, and now the door appears to be wide open for the Bearcats to get into the playoff. I mean, this is crazy. I can't believe I'm saying this, but with Oregon face planning, as we kind of all knew eventually they would, with a lot of uncertainty in the Big 12, maybe Oklahoma State can make a case to get that 4th playoff spot, but I don't know. For me, it looks like it's there for the taking for Cincinnati. Still a lot of football left to be played, but Cincinnati fans have to love where they're sitting right now. Finally, it's officially Michigan week. The Wolverines trounced lowly Maryland yesterday, 59-18. Like the Buckeyes, they sit at 10-1 and will be no lower than number 5 in this week's playoff rankings, setting up a winner-take-all top 5 matchup in Ann Arbor for the Big Ten East Division and a spot in the Big Ten title game. And this is the way that it's supposed to be, right, Buckeye fans? I still don't really know how good Michigan actually is. To me, it looks like pretty much the same formula that Harbaugh's been using there all along. Good defense, solid but not explosive running the ball, solid but not explosive throwing the ball. Look, it hasn't been enough to beat Ohio State in the past, and in most cases hasn't even been enough to keep Michigan in the football game against Ohio State. It's not going to be enough. If that's all we're going to see from Michigan this coming Saturday, it will not be enough to hang with Ohio State. Now, I plan to wrangle Paige and Chad for a much more thorough preview of this game on Thursday, but I'll leave you with these numbers to ponder until then. Last year's game in Columbus was canceled. As we all remember, it was a COVID cancellation, but Jim Harbaugh is 0-5 against Ohio State since becoming Michigan's head coach in 2015. Against Harbaugh, Ohio State is averaging 44 points per game and winning by an average margin of 19. Another few numbers I want to leave you with. Michigan and Ohio State have 6 common opponents this season: Rutgers, Nebraska, Michigan State, Indiana, Penn State, and Maryland. Michigan is 5-1 against those opponents, outscoring them 194-121. That's a point differential of 73. Ohio State is 6-0 against those same opponents, outscoring them 287-85. That's a point differential of 202. So look at those point differentials. 73 for Michigan. They're 5-1 against those opponents. 202 for Ohio State, 6-0 against those opponents. And of course, the one common opponent that really stands out is Michigan State, who handed Michigan its only loss of the season and who Ohio State just beat by 7 touchdowns. Okay, that's going to do it for me. We'll be back, as I say, with a preview of the Michigan game on Thursday. And until then, thanks so much for listening and have a great week, everyone. You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and visit our website at southstandsosu.com.